Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. We're live at Ruth Stitchery. Thanks for your patience with us. We needed a couple extra minutes. As you can see, we got quite the setup this morning. Um, we get a lot of comments about maybe doing some demos in our videos. So we decided that today we would demo a particular technique. So I'm going to be showing you how to do three-dimensional pinwheels. If you know anything about me, I tend to do a lot of pinwheels in my quilts. I just love the way they look. And several years ago, I um, honestly cannot remember if I just saw the technique and learned it, or I actually had a pattern and I made this quilt. So when I'm saying three-dimensional pinwheels, when you look at this, you can see that the pinwheels actually are three-dimensional popping off of the quilt. So it looks a lot harder than it is, but that's what I wanted to show you. So I had done this one, I want to say probably about 10 years ago. And then for Shop Hop in 2019, it was the year that all the stores had 10-inch squares that was our exclusive thing that you would get at our stores was 10-inch squares. And so we did the 3D pinwheels with all the stores' 10-inch squares. And this was our Shop Hop pattern. It was called Twirling Jewels. So it's right here. It's a very simple pattern, 2 pages. And we did just put it up on our website. So I think it's like $2. So if you want it, it's on our website. I will figure out shipping because I don't think you should have to pay $9 for a $2 pattern. We'll adjust that shipping. Or you can always just call the store if you don't live here and you want to get it. But there's a couple different ways to that I have done this three-dimensional pinwheel. All 3 of the ways I'm going to show you all dealt with charm packs, which are 5-inch squares. So this one was an older fig tree quilts fabric pattern, and I had a charm pack of it. And so these were 5-inch squares that I used. And basically, they just get folded in half. That will make sense when I start to do the demo. This one started as 10-inch squares that were then all cut into 5-inch squares and then paired together. You can kind of see that there's 2 fabrics showing on these. And I love that there are 2 fabrics in each pinwheel. So to do the demo, something I had been thinking about for a long time is, what if all of the pinwheels were the same color and the background is what changed? And so LQ and I were looking around trying to find something that we could use as a background that had some interest to it. So if all the pinwheels were the same, that still wouldn't look all the same because the background changed. So we actually found one of our 108-inch wide backs, whoops, that was ombra'd. And so we actually chose one of the wide backs that had this ombre through it, because I thought, how cool would that be to use this as the background? And I think we've mentioned before, wide backs are not only for the backs of your quilts. You can use them in your quilts. And so because it's such a wide fabric, I didn't have to buy as much for my background. And so that is what we chose to use as background. And as a sneak peek here, let me just show you what the finished product looks like before I actually walk you through how to do it. So here is with the darkest background. I chose to use a solid white 5-inch square pack and a gray. Just wanted something neutral, but something that certainly you could tell there was a difference in fabrics. And so this is a dry brush gray from Wilmington. And this, I believe, is a Bella Solid white from Moda. And so that's what I started with, just one charm pack of each color. And then I ended up cutting these background squares to 6.5 inches. And so out of one 6.5 inch strip on that wide back, I got 16 6.5 inch squares. So that was enough for 4 blocks. So you can really get quite a bit out of one strip. And so this was the darkest background with my white and gray pinwheel. And then it kind of goes into a medium color. And actually, I think there's a color in between this one and this one, which is what I'm going to demo with. So you'll see that. And then the lightest one. And so I thought, yes, in my spare time, I will eventually make all of these blocks and put this quilt together and maybe write up a little pattern like the Twirling Jewels from Shop Hop, because it is slightly different what I did this time. Okay, are we ready? We're going to get started. So, like I said, this looks like it would be a lot harder than it really is. And I think you'll be really surprised at how easy it really is. So here you start out with your 5-inch squares of 2 different colors. And your first step is to make a half square triangle. So everybody knows how to do that, right? We draw the line, diagonal line on the back of our lightest 5-inch square. Put that right sides together. And then you are going to stitch. I guess I could do this so you could see this. You're going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from the line on both sides. And then you will cut on the line that you drew and cut it in half, and you'll end up with these 2 pieces. Okay. Now, normally I would always say press in the towards the darker fabric. However, what I have found doing these 3D pinwheels is that I always press open on this, okay? The reason I do that is because we're going to be folding this in half, and when you press to one side, I found that it is a little more difficult to get a really crisp fold right there at that seam. So if you go ahead from the beginning and press that seam open, it'll be a lot easier in the next couple of steps. So as always, I know we get a little bit wonky sometimes in our half square triangles. So I chose to trim these down. So I ended up with just slightly oversized here, and then I wanted to trim them down to 4.5 inches. So I've got these 2 are now trimmed. Everybody knows, I think at this point, that I absolutely love the block lock rulers. And so I use the block lock ruler on this as well to trim these down. So if you haven't seen one before, there's this little groove on the back side. The block lock logo always goes on typically the side that you have pressed away from. And so in this situation, your seam is pressed open, but I found that if I put that block lock logo on the lighter side, I can still kind of lock that into my seam, hold it there. This is a 4.5 inch block lock. If I had one that was a little bit bigger, I would be using the markings to make sure that I was within the measurements to trim down. But this one is the exact size that I want to trim down. So I get it on here, and then I can go ahead and trim that. I've got my rotating mat. So of course I've got stuff in the way. So I'm going to turn that, and then I can go ahead and do another side. I can turn it one more time and do that last side. And that way you can see how little got trimmed away. However, I have a perfect half square triangle now. Okay, so once you get them trimmed, this is why pressing them open, that seam open, this is why I like to do that, because your next step is to fold this half square triangle in half right at that seam. And so I found that if I pressed to one side, it wasn't as easy to turn it or to get it ironed really flat. And you want it to, so that you only see one side. You don't necessarily want to see the other color from that side. Okay, so what I do is take this to my ironing board. I'm going to fold this right at that seam. And do you see how easy it folds since I pressed that seam open? And then I just gave it a really good press to get it flat. Okay, so that is that step. So once I have it in at this step, my next step from here is I'm going to fold it one more time so that you can see just a little tiny piece. So let me show you that again. So I've got my folded edge here. Oh, thank you. I've got my folded edge here, and then I'm just going to fold this one corner. I'm going to fold it over so that you can see a little bit, and I'll put a little pin in there. Of course. Good. Okay. So I'm going to give it a really good press like this one so that that crease is there. And then it is ready to attach to my background. Okay, so let me go to my next one. So you can actually cut all your backgrounds, prepare all of I guess the little spindles of your pinwheel, whatever you want to call these. You could get them all prepared, and then you can actually chain piece these through because they all have to be going in the exact same direction and position. Um, you can go ahead and get them all lined up, and then you can chain piece them. So you can see that I've got this one and I've got this one. As long as you go ahead and pin them all in the same corner of your background, then you'll know that your pinwheel is going to come together. So because of the dimension of these, I feel like the best thing to do at this point is to put a little basting stitch. Can you see that? Can you see that? I put a little basting stitch to hold this pinwheel in place. So I've got this side pinned, and then this side, I go ahead 1/8 of an inch away. I go ahead and baste this in place. To me, it just makes it a lot easier to sew the 4 pieces together if this is already attached to the background. Okay, so I'll get them all based in place. So I did these 2. Once I have them in place, I can go ahead and put these right sides together so that I've got one going one direction, the other one going this other direction, and then I put them right sides together. And then here's a little tip is to always start at the side that has all of that fabric coming together. So do you see how much fabric is in there? You've got the dimensional pinwheel part plus your background. And so if you can go ahead and start your seam at that end, you won't get any puckering. What I have found, ask me how I know that. If you start at this end and you come down because of all of this fabric bulk that is in here. You can get a slight little pucker once you start to hit all of that down there. So I find it's easier start on the end that has all the fabric bulk in there. And you get that sewn together. And then again, because of all of that fabric that's in that seam, I pressed this seam open. So it looks quite strange because of the different layers of fabric, but that is what your seam would look like once it was pressed open. Okay, so once I do that and I have sides, all of my sides together, I can then sew them together like a four patch. So once you've got them like this, it's sewing together as a four patch. You'll sew your two top ones, your bottom ones together, and then you will sew these together. I put a lot of pins in that seam as I sew, um, and go quite slowly once you start to hit this middle section. It is a lot of fabric bulk that is going to be in there. So if you just take your time, but again, remember in any pinwheel, that center is what you want as best as possible to line up all of your seams in there. So you can see my little seam allowance here, so that when I go to sew them together, I can do as best as I can to get that nice little point in the middle where they're all coming together. So I'm going to flip this over so you can really see how this seam looks in the back. And it is not easy to get these seams to press open. I will be honest with you, because of all of the fabric bulk you've got in there. You just have to kind of take your time. I like steam. You can also use some best press and a dry iron, or best press and a steam iron if you want, to try to get that as flat as you possibly can. So at this point, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, which is why I did my backgrounds at 6.5 inches. So this is creating a 12-inch finished block. But what's great, my pinwheel is small enough that if I chose to, I could trim this down and make them a little bit smaller if I felt like there was too much background. So if I lay these out, you can kind of see what these are going to look like next to each other. I'm going to do that. I don't know if you guys can really see how that looks, but you can see that with this ombre, if I had more dark, I could do several darks and then do a couple mediums into the lighter, and then I could repeat and do medium and dark. I haven't quite decided yet. Um, but looking at this might be a little too much background for me. So I think trimming these down maybe to where they will finish at 10 inches is something I might consider. But that is how I do my three-dimensional pinwheels with two colors. As I mentioned earlier, this very first one I did, it was a charm pack that I just put like colors together. But this is a little simpler because you're not making the half square triangle first. You are just taking that charm pack, taking those 5-inch squares and folding them in half once. So there's no seam there in the middle. You're just ironing them into a triangle and then flipping that corner over. But I did baste again in place the same. This one is using the two, and you can see I have less background around them. And this one, when you get our Twirling Jewels pattern, what I chose to do on this one was I did not make double half square triangles. I did not draw that line and then sew a 1/4 inch on both sides. I drew the line and sewed directly on the line. And that way, when I trimmed my 1/4 inch seam, I only had 1 half square triangle, and then I had some leftover triangles. And with that fabric is what I used to do this little sew and flip on the corner of each block so that it has this sort of alternate design in the middle. Same thing was done here with some extra fabric. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do the 3-dimensional pinwheels. I love a quilt that looks like it's harder than it is. And it takes a little bit of time, but it's certainly not difficult. But if you have any other questions about how to do the 3-dimensional pinwheel, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. And as promised, we are going to do a little giveaway during this video as well. We want to start doing these monthly giveaways at least once a month when we do our videos. So we've only done it once before. But just as an appreciation for watching us live, we're going to throw a question out at you. And the first person to respond with the correct answer is, since we're talking about charm packs, is going to get this charm pack of polka dots. It's called On the Dot from Wilmington, if you can see that. So I had mentioned that this quilt was from a shop hop several years ago. And so, you know, we've been involved in shop hop every year. I have started advertising that shop hop this year is called Colorful Old Colorado, a stroll down Main Street. That is our theme. The dates of that is August 3rd through August 13th. Every store will be open every day during the 3rd through the 13th from 10 to 5. And so my question is, how many shops are in the Rocky Mountain Shop Hop this year? And the first person to answer with the correct number is going to win our little charm pack. So LQ is watching your comments. We have had some changes recently just in our area with quilt stores. And so I wanted to find out, does anybody know how many shops are involved in Shop Hop this year?
Got a couple answers, but they're not right.
Okay, keep working on it. I'll give you a little hint. There were 11 last year. We do not have 11 this year. Anyone?
Just waiting for those comments to come in. Take a guess, see if they know how many.
How many? How many?
It is not 13 and it is not 8. It is not 12. It is not 13.
Should I give another hint? Last year we had 11.
So we're getting closer.
Okay.
It is not 10.
We're so close.
So close. Come on,
so close, so close.
We have a winner.
All right.
Carrie Martin was the first one to answer 9.
Carrie Martin is correct. We have 9 stores involved in our shop hop this year. Let me see if I can rattle them off so you guys know who's involved. We'll start in Pueblo. We have First Stitches and Stitcher's Garden. And then we have Nala's Quilt Shop in Fountain. And then here in the Springs, we have us, of course, Ruth Stitchery, and we have High Country Quilts. And then we have Society in Castle Rock. And then we have Holly's Quilt Cabin. We have Creative Needle. And then we have Trilata. So that is our 9 stores that are involved in this year's Shop Hop, 3rd through the 13th of August. And our theme this year is Colorful Old Colorado, a stroll down Main Street. We're really excited for you guys to see what the fabric looks like and just the creativity that comes out of what we are doing this year. So more to come on that. That's all you get from us right now. That's the only secrets I can tell you. But we really appreciate you guys watching us. Hope you enjoyed our demo on three-dimensional pinwheels. And we'll see you next week where we are going to do another Meet the Staff with LQ and Janice. So LQ gets to come behind the, or from behind the camera. She's going to be in front of the camera again. And I'm going to interview her and Janice Siegel. So we'll see you next week.